Well, hello, I'm James Brown. I'm an independent historical researcher based in Ayrshire in the southwest of Scotland. This is an introductory video on what I'm about. What I have been doing for a good number of years actually is studying historic documents, the original historic documents, not just reading books, because that's somebody else's work. What I've been looking at are things such as this document. It's a legal document concerning a well-known family, the Moores of Blairston near Maybole in Ayrshire in the 18th century. These are unpublished documents. This is documents that appear in the Ayrshire Archives records, on the family papers, and in the National Records of Scotland in Edinburgh. Because these are largely, they're in many ways ephemera. Sometimes it's just a household receipt for a purchase made. Sometimes it's a serious legal bond where the landowner has borrowed money from someone else and they need this document as proof of the borrowing, and the farms would have been set up as collateral for the borrowings. So there are many, many things we can find in here, and that is what I've been doing for a long number of years. I've transcribed over 400 documents like this one, verbatim. Not only that, I've also gone to the trouble of finding the watermarks on these documents. That tells us where the paper came from. So it's not just a case of about one family and one act in their life. You start to find, where did the paper come from? Why did they buy it from there? So that's the what part of it that I've been doing for a long number of years, more than I'd like to think. But it's been wonderful. I'm absolutely absorbed by it. But why did I do it? Why? Why read about dead people? It's gone. It's transient. And in many ways, as I've said, the documents are ephemeral. A simple thing like a note to a grocer's shop to order some produce, a letter, a simple letter to someone. People long gone, long forgotten. But that's something that motivates me. Everybody's heard the stories of Robert the Bruce, Mary Queen of Scotland, Bonnie Prince Charlie, the big national events, the Reformation in Scotland, the Battle of Bannockburn. These are all well covered in YouTube channels, and very well covered in some cases. There's some exceptional storytellers on YouTube on Scottish history. But I'm looking at the humbler side of things. I'm looking at fairly ordinary people, although some are extraordinary in terms of their achievements in life. But this is why I've done this, really is, I'm driven. If I could quote Oscar Wilde, rather flattering myself here, is that a talented person does what they can. A genius does what he must. And I felt for so many years, I must bring these documents into the light of day and into the hands of people who actually will be learning about their ancestors. The family names I encountered in these documents are things like Kennedy, most often. South Ayrshire was very much a Kennedy stronghold, but of course they didn't live in isolation. They married into the McDowells or to the Cathcarts. They had servants maybe who were called McMurtry or McIlveen, McWhinney, and so on. Many Mac names actually. And this is giving you a light into what will be future episodes in this channel, the Gaelic heritage of Carrick, Carrick being the southern part of Ayrshire. There's the Gaelic heritage, Baltersan Castle, which is what I've been most closely associated with. It started with me 30 years ago, saying to myself, I want to save that building. Beautiful historic building, sadly, has been a ruin for 250 years. I then did research on that, on Baltersan, to add to his story. That took me to the point of looking at original documents. So I must do it, but I mustn't stop there. because as the very famous English archaeologist and Egyptologist Petrie said, a discovery is not a discovery until it's published. And that's why I'm taking my research onto the next stage, and I will be publishing the outcomes of my research. Who am I? I've covered the what and the why. Who am I? Well, I'm one of these ordinary people. I've come from a very ordinary background, raised in the first 5 years of my life in a very old tenement in Glasgow. And look back, and that was a long time ago. It was in another century. So I'm a very ordinary person, but in many ways I'm very Scottish. There is something about Scottish heritage where ordinary people rise up from their circumstances. There's a good old Scots phrase called a lad o' pairds, a multi-talented person. And we find this with people like Alan Ramsay, who grew up in a mining village in Leadhills in South Lanarkshire, from a fairly ordinary family, but rose to be a significant poet. He'll be covered in a future episode. There are others who've invented things. Quite often it was the parish minister would be created because they had time in their hands, time and peace, untroubled by social media, to be inventive. And this, I don't place myself with these people, of course. I'm simply a humble researcher. But in the journey that I've had, I've appeared in Dragon's Den, some of you may know, and you can still find me on Dragon's Den. Unsuccessful, mind you, no money. But I've also featured in the press, in local, national and international press, in my 30-year struggle with saving Baltersan. But that story is better told by what's coming up now, which is a film produced by Ryan Robertson of Gallus Creatives, a short biographical film, and I would like to play that for you now. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn a bit about me to such a degree that you want to learn more. And if you want more episodes on particular subjects, I've got a lot to cover. Maps, language, people. There is so much more to cover, and I would invite you to make suggestions. I'm not an expert, as the very famous Einstein said when he was asked for his telephone number, reached for a telephone book. And somebody said, come on, you're the brainiest man on earth. You can't even remember your telephone number. And his reply, this is probably apocryphal, his reply was, a monkey could remember a telephone number. But knowing where to find something, that is intelligence. And hopefully I'm placing myself amongst very elevated people, but I know where to find things. So you come up with your suggestions on subjects and topics you would like me to cover, and I'll be delighted to go searching. Looking forward to hearing from all of you again in the future. Thank you. Most children are fascinated by castles, really on the basis of knights in armour and Dungeons and Dragons. But for me, I'd visited Baltersan Castle at the age of 5, and really I was so disappointed because there was such a lot missing. It's sad to see ruins, they're not romantic. So I vowed at that age to restore one, not to appeal to people and say, oh, why is it not restored? Well, do it yourself. And that's what I tried to do. I've sold my baby. This is a child I raised for 32 years. And I sold this wee thing. It's a big thing in some ways. But I've sold something that I've been passionately attached to for 32 years. You could go on too long at this, and people would then start to look at you as saying dreamer, fantasist.
He'll never get there. And that's not a nice feeling. Because essentially it's in the same, not quite the same state, but almost the same state as when I bought it. All I've done is clear the insides, and I've moved, as I say, 1,000 tons of earth and stone sideways. No stones have gone up, some more have fallen down.
Just look up and you realise that up there, slowly the weather.
Today, totally overgrown. It's gone back to nature. So in some ways, yes, it's back to when I bought it in 1992. And that's rather sad.
My goodness. Wow.
So it's been a long journey, really, too. In some ways you feel you've failed because you haven't achieved the main object. But in other ways it's not a failure. You know, ruined buildings in Scotland are like wallpaper. People don't notice them. And they say things like, oh, I like it the way it is. They're used to seeing ruined castles. Now, for people to say today, I like it the way it is, well, enjoy it, because it won't stay that way for much longer. There are three kinds of people in this world: the folk that make things happen, the folk that watch things happening, and the third category is the people that say, oh, what happened? I didn't want to be in that last category, and I wasn't comfortable enough to sit in the category that watches things happen. I wanted to make things happen. And I have, to a degree, not to the high degree that I would aspire to, but I've achieved something. Restoration is putting back, restoring something. So you find a piece of carved stone lying on the ground, and you look at it and you look up at the building and say, ooh, that came from up there, so we shall restore it.
My memory of this place is it was buried completely to about this height. Completely buried in sand and guano and weeds and so on.
They call it overburden, you know, and 250 years of weeds that grow and die, and so on. I've done it single-handedly, as simple as that.
And this very spot is memorable because it's where the last barrow load was taken from here when I cleared this place right down to ground level. And I have a nice photograph with the sun shining in on the wheelbarrow, like a little angel shining on my friend, the wheelbarrow.
But the joy of that work is I'm the one who made the discoveries. I found the coins, I found the broken pots that tell a story, the broken wine bottles that tell a story.
Let's see what I've got. Ah, yeah, beauty. That is an 18th century wine bottle.
If anybody saw me, they'd think, who is this guy? He's eccentric. This businessman wandering through a field, he must be lost, or he's lost his mind. However, it all adds to the story. You're building up a story of why these buildings were built, who built them, and what is the history behind them. Why did they all fall into ruin? I've discovered all of these, and they all tell a story. Discovery is an important word in this journey. I've had the joy of discovery. You might think, what, digging in an old ruined building?
The most memorable thing is one of the smallest things that I found. We have all these wonderful big stones, the wonderful archways in this place, but it was a little piece of plaster with a star scraped into a graffito, and it just looked like a child's work. These small things, they're personal. You're touching something somebody touched 400 years ago. Having mentioned finding these little treasures, a bit of plaster, a clay pipe bowl, an old coin, but in fact I actually found a wife through this castle. Amazingly. I was contacted by Susie. She was a journalist with the local newspaper, and she asked to do an article on Baltersan, and because I'd sent her drawings and material for her article, I do calligraphy as a hobby, or have done in the past, calligraphy, and she was entranced with this calligraphy, and that led to a date, and that led to a marriage. So yes, you could say in fact that greater than the treasure of clay pipe bowls and clay plaster work, finding a wife through a ruined castle is the better phrase.
It would be nice if people recognise what I've done. And it is nice to see one's name appearing. I've just received a book, and so I open up the book and there in the acknowledgements, there's my name, because I helped her get research material. So I'm already having that sort of impact, and it's nice. You're not buying it, you're earning it. I think looking to the future and looking backward, being in the future and looking backward long after I've gone, people will write down, I would hope, James Brown saved Baltersan. And I think that'd be good. Obviously I'm not around to see it, but perhaps my daughters and my grandson and granddaughter and great-granddaughter, perhaps they'll look upon it and say, I wish I'd realised that about great-granddad. I think that'd be a nice legacy.
So here I'm showing you my banner of my new identity, because must bear in mind I'm no longer the owner of Baltersan Castle. That's passed to a new custodian. But what I still have is a lot of stories, a lot of memories. They're no use just sitting in my head. So I've created my own little side hustle, perhaps you could call it, which is called Little Baltersan. In Gaelic, Baltersan Beg. Bala is town. Tarsan is a crossing place in Gaelic. It was a cross-steading, or a little farm town beside a river. And Beg is simply Gaelic for little. In Scots we would say wee Baltersan. So I'm maybe Mac Baltersan in some ways. I'm son of Baltersan. And as you'll see on the banner, I'm a researcher and so on. But the most interesting thing on that banner is shown there in colour. And it's a colour representation of a wood carving that existed in Baltersan Castle in the 16th century. Look at the strange characters there. I'll also have a separate film to show you of a wood carver making a replica of that image of the wood carving. There's a big story to be told there, and I'll look forward to presenting that in a future episode.